Now that the land is secure and Canada has a police force to protect it, a railway for transportation is complete. The next step of the plan is ready. Immigration. Although national policy was SJAM's idea, Sir Wilfrid Laurier was the Prime Minister that really spearheaded immigration to Western Canada and is likely the reason for many of us living in Airdrie today. By 1885, most of Canada's population was living in Ontario and Quebec. With the railway now completed, at the turn of the century, the government focused on Western Canada and building Canada's economy. To do this, they needed people. Between 1890 and 1895, more immigrants arrived in Canada. At the end of that 5-year period, 250,000 people had come to farm in the West. This wasn't enough people. Sir Wilfrid Laurier wanted more newcomers to settle in the West and start farms. He also needed more workers for Canada's other growing industries, such as mining. Laurier launched a campaign to bring immigrants to Canada, and the government was successful at bringing approximately 2.4 million people from 1890 to 1913. The highest number of immigrants arriving in Canada in any one year was 1913. 487,000 people crossed the Atlantic Ocean and arrived on the east coast of Canada. Squirrel moment. In 1914, the number of immigrants dropped significantly to 150,484. Why do you think that is? Right, World War I. Although I believe that social studies is more important than math, it is necessary to do some adding. Students, please add 150,484 to 2.4 million. Rounding up, what number do you get? Keeping that in your head, check with my answer. Between 1890 and 1914, the number of immigrants to Canada and the West came to a whopping, drumroll please, 2.55 million people. Holy cow! How is this possible? We've all experienced winters on the prairies, and it is nothing to boast about. So who did the government target, and how were they able to convince people to come to the West? All right, let's think about this for a moment. How do people get you to do something or buy something that you had never considered before? Yep, he did 2 things. One, he made it easier to get to the West by building more tracks. And second, advertising. Clifford Sifton was in charge of immigration to Canada. He was the big man in charge, the big cheese. His goal was to attract people to Canada, and to reach his goal, he launched a publicity campaign. First, millions of posters and pamphlets were made in many languages. Second, the government brought foreign journalists to Canada. They toured the country and wrote about it when they returned home. 3, the government also sent speakers around the world to spread the word about the great Canadian West. They even stuffed a buffalo and sent it to London to put on display. Yep, you heard me correctly, a stuffed buffalo. What do you think the government was trying to inspire in the citizens of London? Think. Yeah, okay. If you saw something you had never seen before, about a place you had never heard about, what would you feel? Maybe curiosity? Maybe a desire to want to visit this place with cool animals? Now that we know how the government convinced people to come west, we need to know whom they targeted. They didn't want just anybody to come. People needed to have the right background and skills. 3 groups were considered: United States farmers, the British, and Eastern Europeans. The United States was running out of good farmland, and ads were sent to farmers, presenting Canada as the last best West. Many Canadians were from British origins and wanted their family and friends to come. Plus, this would strengthen the British character in the country. Eastern European farmers were thought to be suitable because they had experience growing crops and would endure the hardships of pioneer life. Although these people may not speak English now, it was the hope of the government that families would assimilate into English culture. Time to stop and think. Let's ponder these choices for a moment and think about what we know about Canada. Canada is multicultural, pluralistic, diverse, and bilingual. Our two official languages are French and English. Is there a group of people the government forgot to invite? The French, maybe? Or maybe not. On a side note, British beat the French on the Plains of Abraham. The French have a strong presence in Canada, and the British have failed to assimilate them, but can't kick the French out. The next best thing? Bring in more English. The government did this consciously during the Great Migration, and again now. The government brought farmers to the West, but in particular, they brought English farmers, those sneaky little buggers. And if they weren't English, they brought people over that they hope would assimilate. They did not invite the French. Hello, hold the phone. Aren't we supposed to be bilingual? Of course, this act of exclusion caused distrust in the French, and they worried that their language would not be protected. Hello, hold the phone again. Didn't Confederation recognize both languages? We'll come back to this conflict later between the French and the English. Now, back to what we were talking about before. The advertising wasn't the only thing that helped encourage people to immigrate. There were external factors that pushed people out of their country and pull factors that brought them to Canada. Push factor. Population growth in Europe dramatically increased, and there was not enough land or jobs for everyone. Pull factor. Canada offered inexpensive land and lots of it. Plus, there were workers needed as shopkeepers, coal miners, teachers, etc. Push factor. Several people in Eastern Europe were persecuted or treated badly for what they believed in because of religious and political beliefs. Pull factor. Canada gave people religious and political freedom. Push factor. Famine or lack of food, like the Irish potato famine in 1847, also led people to leave. Pull factor. Canada was the land of milk and honey, the land of endless opportunities. Push factor. Travel was affordable and safe. Pull factor. Better farming techniques and technology could produce a higher yield. Plus, wheat was produced or grown that was better suited for our climate. Pull factor. Some immigrants had relatives already living in Canada. Posters the government had made showed images of huge, bright skies, endless wheat fields, and ready-made farms. They advertised Canada as the last best West and offered cheap land. It sounded like an opportunity that they couldn't pass by. But remember earlier, kids, I told you that if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Although Canada was a land of opportunity, the government failed to mention a few details. Remember the details they forgot to tell the Chinese workers? First missed detail. After traveling across an ocean, you will have to travel halfway across a continent. Don't worry, it's mostly flat. Second important detail. Once you have reached your destination, there will not be a house ready for you, and there will be few trees for you to build it out of. Oh, and we aren't going to give you any tools to build a house neither. You have to make a little bit of money first, but fear not, we have lots of sod that you can use. Not ideal when it rains, and I hope you aren't squeamish about worms. The third important detail. We only get blue skies like you see in the posters about 5 months of the year. The other 7, they can be a little less predictable. Oh, and have I told you about our winters? Last important detail. You are already poor, so even if you wanted to go home, you are so poor that you can't buy a ticket back. Ha ha! Suckers! Bottom line, life was hard for these settlers in the West. But through hard work and perseverance, they were successful at creating a strong agricultural and mining industry. Through their efforts, other industries grew, like forestry and oil and gas. Today, Alberta has the strongest economy in Canada.